Pablo Picasso. You hear that name and you immediately think of artistic genius, right? But behind the most famous artist of the 20th century, there's a much darker, much more complicated story. It's one of incredible brilliance and incredible brutality. Today, we're going to explore the man who was both a titan of art and, to many people who loved him, a monster. So let's just dive right in with a quote from the man himself that really gets to the heart of it all. He said, "There are two types of women, goddesses and doormats." Wow. I mean, that one sentence tells you so much about the disturbing conflict at the core of his character. For Picasso, women were either these divine sources of inspiration, or they were objects to be used, and he often treated them as both, sometimes at the exact same time. And this really lays out the paradox perfectly. On one side of the ledger, you have this absolute giant, the guy who co-invented Cubism, created over 50,000 works of art, and was so famous he got an exhibition in the Louvre while he was still alive. But on the other side, you have a man whose life was just a trail of manipulation, cruelty, and real tragedy for the women around him. So the question is, how do you even begin to reconcile these two people? To even try to understand the artist, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to a time when his talent seemed less like a skill he learned and more like some unstoppable force of nature. You know, this just sounds like something out of a myth, but it's true. His very first word wasn't mama or papa. It was peace, short for lápiz, the Spanish word for pencil. I mean, think about that. Before he was even calling for his parents, he was calling for his tool. His father, who was an art professor himself, saw this spark and started formally training him when he was just 7. And this timeline, it's not just impressive, it's honestly hard to believe. At 9 years old, he paints his first masterpiece. By 13, he gets into a top-tier art academy by doing the month-long entrance exam in 1 week. The legend goes that his own father was so blown away by his 13-year-old son's talent that he just handed Picasso his own brushes and swore he'd never paint again. Okay, so that early mastery was really just the starting point. Next, we're going to see how he went from being a master of the rules of art to completely shattering them. You see, Picasso didn't just have one style. He had entire artistic languages that he created. His blue period was born from a deep depression. Then he falls in love, and suddenly we're in the warm rose period. But it was his African-influenced work that was a total game changer. It shocked everyone, and it paved the way for a true revolution. And that revolution was Cubism. Now, the most important thing to get about Cubism is that it was so much more than a new look. It was a new way of thinking about the world. Picasso and his friend George Brocker were basically asking, why should I paint a face from just one angle when I can show you all of its angles at once? They were literally breaking reality apart and putting it back together on the canvas, and in doing so, they changed art history forever. But as his fame as an artist exploded, the darkness in his personal life just got deeper and deeper. The very women who inspired these masterpieces, well, they often paid a terrible price for getting so close to his genius. Before we really dive into his relationships, it's important to see this side of him too. During the Nazi occupation of Paris, Picasso was completely defiant. This legendary comeback, a Nazi officer points to a photo of his huge anti-war painting Guernica and asks, "Did you do that?" And Picasso just fires back, "No, you did." This was a man with incredible courage who could stand up to fascists, but he couldn't, or maybe just wouldn't, show that same kindness to the people closest to him. And this table gives us just a quick, heartbreaking look at the pattern. Take his wife, Olga. He refused to divorce her, not out of love, but because he didn't want to split his fortune. So he just trapped her in a sham marriage until she died. Then there's Marie-Therese Walter, who he started seeing when she was just a teenager. She spent her whole life waiting for him, devoted to him, only to be tossed aside. Her story ends in absolute tragedy. And the cruelty, it wasn't just emotional. Françoise Gillot, who was famously the only woman to ever leave Picasso, wrote about it in her memoir. She talked about his sadistic tendencies and even physical violence, including one time where he held a lit cigarette to her cheek. This was what it cost to be his muse. But this next move, this reveals a kind of calculated, devastating cruelty that's just on another level. So Françoise Gillot finally divorces her own husband because Picasso asked her to, and she thinks he's finally going to marry her. Instead, she finds out he secretly went and married another woman, Jacqueline Roque. It was a pure act of revenge, designed to punish her for daring to have a life of her own. So, despite all this chaos in his personal life, or maybe it was even fueled by it, Picasso's creative engine just never, ever slowed down. His last few decades were an absolute whirlwind that cemented his place as a global icon. Just let this number sink in for a second. 50,000. That's the estimated number of artworks he produced in his lifetime. We're talking paintings, sculptures, ceramics, drawings, the whole shebang. The man was creatively restless. He was constantly experimenting and was just unbelievably productive right up to the very end of his life. His influence just became massive. He wasn't just an artist anymore. He was a brand, a cultural phenomenon. I mean, he conquered the most famous museum in the world, the Louvre, while he was still alive. He created giant public art that became city landmarks. Even the shirt on his back, that simple striped shirt, became an icon for what a modern artist looks like. So in the end, what are we left with? We have this towering achievement in art and the wreckage of the lives that it was built on. And his death didn't bring any kind of peace. And that's the thing. The tragedy didn't stop when he died. His widow, Jacqueline, actually banned two of his own children from his funeral, just continuing this awful cycle of conflict. And then, 13 years later, she also died by suicide, the second of his partners to do so. The shadow he cast was just incredibly long and dark. He died when he was 91, after having some friends over for dinner. And these were his final words, spoken just before he had a fatal heart attack. A toast to life from a man who consumed so much of it right up until his very last breath. And this is the question we're ultimately left with, isn't it? It's a question we're all grappling with more and more these days. Can we celebrate these revolutionary paintings that hang in a museum while also acknowledging the immense pain that was caused by the hand that painted them? There's just no easy answer, and Picasso's legacy, well, it forces us to stare that question right in the face.